Good day everyone, I'm Katime Pantoong, and in this video, I will be discussing about cognitive development of the preschoolers. But first, let's talk about cognitive factors and learning. When you think about it, maybe cognitive factors and learning, you think about traditional principles of learning. And maybe traditional principles of learning really don't help us to understand what goes in a child's mind or what is going on in a child's mind. But Piaget's theory really does have quite a lot to say about the child's mind. So, for example, Dr. Piaget described the ways in which a child structures his or her thinking different ages. These are the stage descriptions that I have here. Sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete, and formal operational. So when you think about sensory motor stage, you're thinking about infants and toddlers who understand their world through senses and actions, right? So when you think about pre-operational stage, you are thinking about the importance of language and mental images. So when you think about concrete operational, you're thinking about logic or logical reasoning really being applied especially to objects that are concrete, objects that they can see. And when you think in adolescence in the formal operational stage, you are thinking about more abstract thinking, more hypothetical thinking, and scientific reasoning. The preschooler symbolic and initiative thinking. So, this is the two substages of pre-operational stage. First, symbolic substage. Preschool children show progress in their cognitive abilities by being able to draw objects that are not present by their dramatic increase in their language and make-believe play. Second, initiative substage. Preschool children begin to use primitive reasoning and ask a litany of questions. Now, Piaget's description, I believe, really help us to understand generally how the mind works. But it really doesn't tell us how a child reads, maybe how a child solves mathematical problems, how the child learns science, for example, how the child composes an essay. It really leaves out a lot about how the mind works on specific kinds of tasks like reading, writing, arithmetic, and so on. But we can get a lot of clarity about how the mind works with respect to reading, writing, arithmetic by looking at information processing model. What is information processing model? Information processing model, it is another way of examining and understanding how children develop cognitively. It conceptualizes children's mental process through the metaphor of a computer processing, encoding, storing, and decoding data. So when we think about information processing, you're really thinking about how children process information about their world. So first, how information comes into their mind, how they store the information, how they transform it, and then how they retrieve it to show us that they learned what intended to teach or what we intended them to learn. So when you think about cognition then, you're thinking about cognition is beginning when children detect information from their environment. And the information comes in through their senses, through sensory perceptual processes. So, the senses really have to do with acuity, right? So, visual acuity, hearing acuity. Perceptual process really help children to make meaning of the information that is coming in through their senses. So, visual perception or auditory perception, making meaning of the information that they see or hear or touch or taste. So once children have collected the information from their environment through their senses and having meaning of that information, they store and transform and retrieve the information through the process of memory. Now, information can flow back and forth between memory and perceptual processes, as I have indicated here. As Dr. Sontrak and Yusin say that this information processing model here is really oversimplified because they designed it to illustrate the main cognitive processes and their interrelationship. It is important for us to recognize the relationship, for example, between memory and language, between thinking and sensory, and perceptual processes, for example. The reality is that all of these cognitive processes that are identified here work in tandem and have to operate simultaneously in order for children to demonstrate their ability to think, to reason, and solve problems. Which can in fact means that if there is a breakdown in one or more of this process, it will impact the complete cognitive process and that will impact the extent to which the children will learn. The other thing that I want to think about is when we think about thinking, you want to think about children as thinking about information, and they may think about language, they may think about visual spatial information, thinking in images, or they may think the strategies that they're gonna use next in order to solve a problem. So, thinking really is related to specific content with our language, images, or strategies. They introduce two other concepts related to information processing. I want to say a few words about input and output. So when we think about information entering the brain, it's gonna enter the brain through the senses. Gonna make meaning of the information, and then the brain is going to sort, is going to store, transform the information, and in order for the child to demonstrate that he or she can retrieve information from memory in order to think reasons and solve problems. So whenever you're thinking about task, you want to think about the input demands of the task, and you also want to think about the output demands of the task. Because, for example, if a task would require a child to provide a written response, and find motor and visual motor integration abilities a relative weakness that might impact the performance on the task not because of a weakness in the content of the task, but because of a weakness in the output demand of the task. Language development. Children language development becomes increasingly complex in the four main areas. Number 1, phonology. Second, semantics. Third, syntax. And fourth, pragmatics. Try saying the word helps out. Try saying the word helps out loud. Paying close attention to the Try saying the word helps out loud. Paying close attention to the final sound of the word. After that, say the word crabs out loud again. Paying attention to the final sound. After getting over the embarrassment of talking to yourself, especially if you're in crowded place. What did you notice about the final sounds of these words? If you say that they are different, you're absolutely correct. And helps, the final sound is pronounced like you would expect the letter S to resound. However, in crabs, the ending should have sounded more like a Z. Grabs. The reasoning for this change can be found through the use of phonology, which is the study of speech sounds and how they change depending on certain situations or placements in syllables, words, and sentences. Semantics. Semantics is the study of meaning in language. For example, in everyday use, a child might make use of semantics to understand mom's directive to do your chores as do your chores whenever you feel like it. However, the mother was probably saying, do your chores right now. Syntax. Syntax is the order or arrangement of words and phrases to form proper sentences. The most basic syntax follows a subject plus verb plus direct object formula. For example, Jillian hit the ball. Syntax allows us to understand that we wouldn't write hit Jillian the ball. Next is pragmatics. Pragmatics is a branch of linguistics, which is the study of language. Pragmatics focuses on conversational implicature, which is a process in which the speaker implies and a listener infers. Simply put, pragmatics studies language that is not directly spoken. Instead, the speaker hints at or suggests a meaning, and the listener assumes the correct intention. In a sense, pragmatics is seen as an understanding between people to obey certain rules of interaction. In everyday language, the meanings of words and phrases are constantly implied and not explicitly stated. In certain situations, words can have a certain meaning. You might think that words always have specifically defined meaning, but that is not always the case. You may think that words always have specifically defined meaning, but I mean, you may think that words always have a specifically defined meaning, but that is not always the case. Pragmatics studies how words can be interpreted in different ways based on the situation. For example, in pragmatics, you are in line at a store to pay for your purchases. The cashier asks, "How are you today?" Do you immediately go into an in-depth account of your health issues, varying mood, relationship status, and everything else going in your life? Of course not. Usually, you respond with something similar to, "Fine, how are you?" With the same expectation that the cashier will not go into full detail of how she truly is. This interaction perfectly shows pragmatics at work. It is understood that this question does not really ask you to explain everything going on in your life. The application relies on the context situation. It is good manners to ask strangers how they are, but it is not intended for a detailed response. Language and social interaction. Vygotsky believed that young children use language both to communicate socially and to plan, guide, monitor their behavior in self-regulatory fashion, inner speech or private speech. Vygotsky introduced the term of zone of proximal development or ZPD. ZPD refer to as too difficult for a child to master alone, but can be mastered with the guidance of adults or more skilled children. ZPD captures the preschooler children's cognitive skills that are in the process of maturing. The young children's theory of mind. Theory of mind refers to the individual's thoughts, how about mental processes works. It includes awareness of one's own thought processes, social cognition, understanding that people can hold false beliefs, ability to deceive, to distinguish appearance from reality, and ability to distinguish fantasy from reality. A quick look of what preschoolers can do. In receptive language, or 3 to 5 years old, the child is able to understand both verbal and nonverbal forms of communication. The child is able to match identical objects, colors, shapes, symbols. The child is able to recite the alphabet and numbers in sequence. Domain, cognitive development. Attention and activity level of the 4 to 5 or 5 to 6 years old. The child is able to sustain attention and modulate its activity at age expected levels. High-ordered mental abilities, or concept formation. The child develops basic concepts pertaining to object constancy, space, time quantity, seriation, etc., and uses this as the basis for understanding how materials are categorized in his or her environment. High-ordered mental abilities, or cause and effect relationship. The child is able to understand the cause-effect relationships. Memory, or episodic memory. The child is able to recall people he has met, events, and places he has been to. Memory for concept-based knowledge, semantic memory. The child is able to store verbal information in short and long-term memory. High-ordered mental abilities, or logical reasoning. The child is able to follow the logic of events, reasons why this happened, and draw accurate conclusion by evaluating the facts presented to him. Higher ordered mental abilities, or cognitive flexibility. The child is able to shift to move adaptive cognitive processing strategies in order to effectively deal with new and unexpected conditions on his or her own environment, including problem situation. So these are some practices that help develop the cognitive skills of preschoolers. For 3 years old, speak with children as often as possible. Add new information to your children's sentences. Teach children to memorize first and last names. Provide books for children to read and read the same books to them. Encourage interest in reading and writing by sharing a grocery list or notes for parents. Count objects of interest. Explain why and how things happen with the help of a reference book. Provide sets, toys, and other objects that go together. And sing simple toys. For 4 years old, read aloud each day and encourage children to look at books on their own. Say nursery rhymes and finger plays together. Encourage in writing on words. Teach important number and space concepts. Teach children the correct use of the telephone. And encourage 4 years old to help you plan and plant a garden. For 5 years old, add drama to your reading sessions each day by using different voices for different characters. Ask 5-year-olds to tell you a story. Ask what-if questions. Involve children in writing thank you notes. Give opportunities to sort, group, match, count, and sequence in real-life situations. Take questions seriously. 5-year-old children will show an increasing interest in numbers. Encourage interest in jokes, nonsense, and riddles by reading numerous stories. And give opportunities to express dramatic and creative interest. So, that's the end of my report. Again, my name is Katime Espantoong, and thank you for watching.